And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our guest needs no introduction, so I won't give him one because he's too prideful to begin with. It's the one and only Dr. Ray Guarendi. And believe it or not, this title, Drama-Free Discipline, hardly. Dr. Ray coaches you to parenting success. That may be true. Published by EWTN Publishing, naturally available through our EWTN religious catalog, EWTNRC.com for all things Catholic. Mr. Drama-Free himself, how are you doing?
Did not my people and my attorney contact you regarding this kind of vitriol?
That's right.
In the introduction?
It's a way of promoting your book, and I'm trying to expand your audience from the small...
Double it from 4 to 8.
It is. That's right. I try to bring you up all the time on Father Spitzer's
Yes, and I hear you.
Universe.
Scurrilous remarks you make.
That's right. So it's interesting, too, because I originally heard the title, Drama-Free Discipline, and then I was wondering, why is that? And it's because you really have little vignettes and little,
that's what they did.
Sense, plays, so to speak, little, to kind of demonstrate the different issues that the average family really deals with on a regular basis. What made you decide to put a book together that used that kind of a format?
2 reasons. The first is that about 90% of daily discipline trouble comes under the umbrella of several things. Mm-hmm. Disrespect, sibling quibbling, chore shirking, homework hassles, meal ordeals, temper tempests, all of that. If you take about 10 or 12, they gobble up about 90%, and that's the ones that are in there. That's one. Some years ago, the second reason, a PhD clinical psychologist came to my office, and she was being eaten alive by her 5-year-old. And she was doing all the psychologically correct things, of course, and he was ruling her. And as I described some things she could do, she said, well, it would really help if you just came to my house.
I saw that.
And demonstrate this for me.
I was going to ask you, how often do you do?
Not very often, but she was a special
Why don't
lady.
you go to somebody's house when they ask you that? Is it just timing,
or is
it
opens up
bigger
complications.
issues?
Yeah, it opens up complications. But she was somebody I knew. And I said, okay. So I just kind of sat in her living room and I watched her interact with this kid. And then I could say, okay, now, that's what that is.
Right.
That sets up the scenarios. And then I step into the scene, commenting on what the kid said, what the parent said, what the parent did, and why it blew up in their face. Kind of like that. Coach.
Yeah, I have to tell you, the story really slows down when you jump in. But
security.
But, in the introduction you say, no end is in sight to all books pitching the psychologically correct ways to raise children. Unfortunately, the kids have no interest in reading them. Do the kids read your books?
My kids mark my books up. I remember one time my son, he's about 9, and I was signing a book, and he goes, Dad, you're not supposed to write in books.
Oh, really?
Just like that. I was corrected.
So you talk about the idea that I would have to been content knowing how to talk louder than children. And you talk about the very same approach. One child absorbs, another will laugh or chew to pieces. No one parenting size fits all kids, or for that matter, stops all kids. And I'm sure that must be frustrating for parents where they're dealing with various siblings in the same family and finding that maybe the way they raise their adultish child, the senior child, doesn't seem to work with the baby child or whatever.
One of the worst things that can happen to you as a parent is to have an easier going kid first. Mm-hmm. It ruins the rest of your parenting because you think you're God's gift to parenthood.
Okay.
Somebody will come in my office, and it's usually one kid that's giving them the most trouble. And I'll ask, is there an older child? Mm-hmm. Most of the time, yes.
Right.
And nothing like this. Much more mature, accepted discipline. We really didn't have any problems at all. Does her homework as soon as she comes home. And I'll go, what do you think of that child? Oh, that child's normal. I said, no, that child's not normal.
Okay.
The second one's normal. The first one was a mulligan round.
Do you ever have an experience with somebody who relates it that way, but maybe they've got a little halcyon view of the past that, they expected it to be worse, so it wasn't so bad, and now they have an idea that it was great?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like I kind of remember it through the rose-colored memory of what it was. I'll tell people, the more kids you have, the more likely you're going to have a kid who just pushes on you. Mm-hmm. Parents will say that to me. We never had this with any of our other 3 children. Okay. That's your son. That's who he is. Well, why is he like that? Well, 2 reasons. 1, that's kind of the way he's wired, and 2, you could probably do some things better.
So, do you think part of it was, for a long time, kind of nurture trumped nature, and we're starting to find out that's not really the truth?
And the research is pouring out. That's exactly right. It used to be, this was a lump of clay, and if I have all the right psychological approaches, I can
the
get
tabula rasa.
Any direction I want. And so when parents come to me and say, we're doing what we're supposed to do, and he's still that way, I go, yeah. My 10 kids, are adopted.
Right.
And they don't even have the same genetic tree of my wife and I. So they're kind of like a scattergram of personalities. A couple of them said, Dad, did you want me to stand in the corner? Well, I'll set the timer, and I'll remind you in case you fall asleep. And the other one looked at me like, I see your lips moving, but I don't hear any sound coming out. Just different kids.
Yeah, I'm going to put you in the corner, Dad.
Yeah, pretty much. I said, please don't.
You say in each scenario, everybody gets a chance to talk, parents, kids, and me. The parents say and do the stuff of discipline, and then the children counter with kid-tested resistance and comebacks. I'm the ever-present bystander. You say, my aim is to make your discipline less wordy, less frustrating, less frequent, and more resolute. Why less wordy?
We tend to think, and I think this has happened with the onslaught of the experts, that children are eminently reasonable creatures. This is the fatal flaw of gentle parenting. Gentle parenting is, I can reason with you. Come, let us reason together. That's right. We can talk about this. I can negotiate. I can remind. And all of these things simply make your voice get louder and angrier, because the child is not likely to say, well, Father, you make such sense. Of course. That's why you're the grown-up. I understand now. But if you look at the bevy of books that are out there, not like this one, they all kind of talk about, here's how you talk. Here's the way you reason. Here's what you quietly do with the child. And in a very last resort, you might have to discipline. Not if you use the right words. And that thing gives me more business in my office than I can count.
Right. Now you start off each one with a question. Who's asking? In this case, you list the actors: mom, 5-year-old Taylor, scene preschool, time pickup. The prologue. Question sounds like a nice way to speak with authority, but their effect is to put authority in question. With the kids kind of like you said, hey Taylor, how was school today? Good. What did you do? Some stuff. Did you have fun? What's wrong with talking to your kid that way?
That's nothing. That was just leading up. Taylor, why don't you get your coat on? Okay? Then we're gonna go to the car now. We need to go to the car now, right? Okay? What we do is we're uncomfortable with directives, and I think that's part of what you alluded to, which is, well, we can just reason. So when you have to give a directive or gasp, a command, we're going to soften it. I see this even on cop shows, Doug. I listen to the cops talk to a perp, and they say, okay, we need you to put your hands behind your back, okay? Well, I'm going to ask you some questions, all right? Wait, I'm not asking you if it's okay. But we do that with kids to kind of soften it. Now, if in fact the child cooperates,
isn't that
it's
the
okay.
same therapeutic model that's splashed across everything? That's why they're doing that. And they're being recorded, and they don't want to be accused later of being overly insensitive.
Insensitive, I suppose.
Right.
But with parents,
just like parents,
it's endemic. And I think what it does, yeah, you're not a jackbooted thug that's going to say, hey, get your coat on, kid. No, it's not like that. But if you say, please put your coat on, that's pretty sufficient.
Right.
But when you say, okay, I did a vignette in a TV show once about that. And I said, what do you think the kid's thinking? Well, I'm thinking it's not okay. I'm thinking it's not all right. I don't want to do it.
Right.
So, again, those are, I call them addenda, Doug. You add them to the end of your request. You need to come in. Did you hear me? I said now. We add more words on the end of our words trying to make the words have impact.
Well, how would you change that?
I need you to come in, son. I don't want to ask you again. If you do, you're not going back out.
So it's all one statement.
Just here. I don't want to fight in discipline. I don't want to argue with you, son. I don't want to get to the point where I have to go to confession and go, bless me, Father. Before children, I was pretty nice.
Right.
Now I'm not pretty or nice.
Right.
Parents don't like to have to say, I talk to my kid like I talk to no one else. And so quiet, calm discipline is actually very kind because you don't get so frustrated.
Well, you refer to this, and in each section you have that kind of go through, and then you have an epilogue. In this one you say, question discipline can get good answers provided both you and your child understand that the matter is not open to question. The key question is it better to ask first, then get more direct if needed, or is it better, nicer even, to begin by being direct, which is what you just basically said?
Some parents will say to me, should you say please? Like if you want to send your 5-year-old to the corner, do you say, please go to the corner? I go, yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. As long as he understands it's not negotiable. Right. You're not saying, therefore you have the option to go to the corner. I'm just saying please because it's polite. Good manners. Yeah, it's good manners.
Right, why not do that kind of thing? Now, when you labeled these and did them in a certain order, why did you pick the order that you picked?
Age. Start out young.
It starts out young.
Yeah, if you look at the back of the book, assuming you had read the book, sir. If you, you wrinkled up all the pages, making it look like that. To show that on camera makes it look like you actually read that.
It was a dramatic experience trying to read this book. You say, in this particular one, discipline is easier when one is wide awake and thinking clearly, but at 1:45 in the morning, most are pretty fuzzy. So what he was saying, don't fight with the kid
that was
when you're
bedtime
tired?
bad times. That was a bedtime bad times. And what I did is I went through all the ways that parents try to get bedtime cooperation. All the ways they do it. And then I made my suggestions on what if mom said this at 7:30 at night.
That's what you call the multi-consequence approach?
Yes.
Okay.
For example, let's say that this 4-year-old just every night, and parents will tell me this, when's bedtime? I don't know, anywhere between 7 and 10, depending upon what they decide to cooperate. I go, okay.
Somebody really says that?
Oh gosh.
Really?
Bedtime bad times is like a number in the top 5 of preschool problems. So I say this, I say, okay, say to little, let's call him Eve or Dawn or Nap. Honey, I'm gonna have you in bed, we're gonna kiss you goodnight, we say our prayers, we're gonna do the bedtime ritual. And then, now please, no more getting out of bed. No more saying I have to go to the bathroom for the 27th time.
Right.
No more. If you do this, tomorrow, the first 5 things you ask for are going to be no. Now, if he's 4 years old, an expert is going to say, they can't remember that. Oh, of course they can't. You're going to remind him. You're going to say, remember last night? When I said you get out of bed, the first 5 things you're going to ask for are going to be no.
Dad, I didn't really think you meant it.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I didn't think you meant it. You got to do it a few times. But what's amazing is parents are shocked and surprised how fast that can work.
You say, but within a week you think it
Yes,
does
easily. And they come into my office and they've been fighting bedtime for 1.5 years. We had that with my son when we adopted him at age 4. He had never been made to go to bed. Never. First night, my wife says, Raymond, would you put the children to bed? And I said, hi, I'll give you $50 if you do it. I don't have time for that. I'm writing a parenting book.
Okay.
And so we had to do something similar. And
that's why you had to dedicate the book to your parents and then give a nice soliloquy for your wife there, too.
She makes it run, man. Okay, she makes it run.
Right. So in the Champion Cliff Diver, this is the one I think a lot of people probably deal with. A grandparent who protects her grandchild from her parents' proper discipline not only undercuts the parent, but also hurts the child she needs to help. I'm sure that happens a lot.
Oh, gosh. Are you familiar with the advice given to mothers and mother-in-laws on their daughter and daughter-in-law's wedding day? Sit up, shut up, and wear beige. I tell grandmothers that's good advice. Unless your daughter or son or daughter-in-law, son-in-law directly asks you, Mom, what should I do here? And if they directly ask you, you hand them something from your attorney to sign, agreeing that they'll listen to what you're saying. Short of that, I can't tell you, Doug, how many relationships have broken
Right.
because the grandparents, trying to be helpful,
Right.
wanting to be helpful, have said things and they didn't read the response, especially from an in-law.
Do you think there's also, because of the breakup in families and stuff like that, you get a certain amount of, you may have the various grandparents competing with one another to be the one the child might favor the most?
I talk about that one in my grandparent book, which is, I don't want to indulge him like the other grandparents do, but I feel like he wants to see them because they have Disney World over there.
Right.
Exactly. There
Right.
is that
Well, you even say
competition.
here, in fairness to grandparents everywhere, I hear just as often from older generation, they wish their kids would be better disciplined. They would discipline their grandkids more.
Oh yeah,
They
absolutely.
themselves.
It used to be the old stereotype of the grandparent. You know, you finish your 4 cookies before I give you another pint of ice
Right,
cream.
right, yeah.
Not now. I can't tell you how many grandparents say, I just have to shut my mouth. I can't enjoy my grandkids because they're allowed so much freedom to do things, and it makes it tough. And then the grandparents feel guilty. You know, I'm supposed to love my grandkids, but they're hard to be around.
So I thought counting was certainly something you learned in school, but you mentioned that as something you have to do. What is
That's
what's
kind
wrong
of like
with counting?
it was,
and what is counting?
What
in a
counting
sense?
is? Remember the old? I need you to come over here.
Oh, I count to 5 or
1,
something. Oh, okay.
2. Counting is an addenda. It's
Right.
it's something added to the end. Now, counting is a trap because what it's really saying is, I don't mean what I say unless I start to count. And then, oftentimes, parents make the count their consequence. When they get to 3, or if they use the metric alternative 10, what are you going to do then? And kids are savvy. They start to meander in the count. As long as they're meandering and you're counting 1, 2, they're on their way.
I see what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of, what you're saying is, it's delayed cooperation.
Okay. In Know Your Audience, parents who argue over discipline within a child's earshot don't typically settle on one winner and one loser. All too often, nobody wins, young and old. So you get the idea that you need to present a united front?
No two parents are alike. They're different in temperament, tolerance levels, consistency. My wife is a better disciplinarian than I am. But what really can undercut you, because the kids know this, when you start to argue about who is the most psychologically appropriate, that once again, there's that psychological correctness that interferes with confident parenting. I'm going to tell you, you handled that situation wrong. Not because I disagree, but because you were psychologically incorrect. According to which expert? That happens a lot. And I tell parents, a couple of rules I think I offer in there. 1, some simple house rules. If 9-year-old is disrespectful, what do we do? What can we agree upon as a simple house rule? So this way we don't have to go back and forth. That's 1. 2, this worked well for my wife and I. The parent with the better standard rules.
Okay.
For example, I thought it was perfectly appropriate for my boys to burp the alphabet at the table. You know, if you can burp 1, you know.
Were you allowed to do that in your home?
My mother was Italian. I was the oldest Italian son. I could pretty much do what I wanted. Okay, so my wife didn't. Okay, she rules.
Okay.
It's her rule. If I come home from someplace and I'm ready to take the boys to basketball with me, and she says, he gave you trouble all day, he's gone to bed early. Okay, she rules.
You don't say, we need him to win.
Yeah, it's like, I can't drive the lane anymore, honey.
Can you change the grade so he's eligible?
Come on.
Well, you talk about power, and then you talk about a blackout.
Oh, yeah.
What is a blackout?
Had a lady come into my office once, and she had this 14-year-old. She tried to discipline him, and he just made her life miserable. There was no way he was going to accept the discipline. He wasn't going to write the essay. If she said no TV, he went and turned it on. I mean, it was awful. And this was way back in my early days as a shrink. And I realized that if you read parenting books, they talk about placing a consequence, but they seldom talk about what do you do when the kid fights it, when he resists it, when he argues about it, when he challenges it, when he sabotages it. So I said to her, I said, well, until you get the essay, the handwritten essay on disrespect, he has no privileges. Everything gone. Everything. Outside, friends, dessert, favorite hoodie, technology, everything is gone. And she said, "You mean like a blackout?" And I said, "What a good term." And I've used it ever since. Very easy to use. So say, for example, I ask parents, here's an authority test. Your 6-year-old just pushed his sister down. You say, "Go to the corner, please." Will he go? Now, Doug, about half or more of the parents I deal with will say no. No, he won't go. He'll fight, he'll argue, he'll come out 26 times, he'll throw a fit, he'll melt down. What do? Well, I yell, or I grab him and I put him there and I hold him there. I go, "Well, you ain't gonna be able to do that very much because he's getting bigger and you're getting weaker."
Right.
I said, "What if you said..."
So as you go through this book and the aging goes up, some of the situations are similar, but you have to deal with them differently?
Well, yeah, blackout, for example, blackout with a 5-year-old. "Mom, go outside now." Oh, no, honey, you're not going outside. You didn't go to the corner yet. "Where's my juice cup, Mom? Where's my juice cup?" "Oh, you don't have your juice cup. You didn't go to the corner yet." "I might sat down now on my bed." "No, I took it off your bed, honey. You didn't go to the corner yet." In other words, with a 5-year-old, you just simply say, "Okay, by the way, until you go to the corner, you see this is not here." With a 15-year-old, you got a lot more leverage. Curling iron, blow dryer, favorite hoodie,
Car,
money supply. I tell parents, wait a minute, the money supply is gone because he's refusing to write that essay of apology to his grandmother. Okay, well, I buy his lunch. No, you don't. He packs his lunch. The money supply is gone. Okay, well, we're going out to eat tonight. Well, that's good. He doesn't eat. He makes a sandwich before he goes. Grandma didn't get the apology yet. So you have a lot wider spectrum with an older kid. And it's not mean. People say, "Well, geez, it sounds like it's smashing a gnat with a sledgehammer." No, not at all. It's kind.
Right.
I don't want to fight with you just because I say you need to write your grandmother an apology.
Well, I'm working on it, Dad. I'm honest. You say kids can bend, fold, and mutilate the truth with limitless creativity, particularly when the truth is to their definite disadvantage. And again, I mean, the kid is trying to dodge responsibility because he knows there's a downside to accepting it.
There's two factors here. One is when you know what happened. If you know what happened, here's what I advise. And I talk about that. I say, "Truman, I saw you knock the lamp off the table with the pillow."
That's the example you talk about.
I saw it.
Right.
So I'm only going to ask you once, son, if you did. You tell me the truth, here's what's going to happen. You tell me you didn't, I'm going to accept it. But here's what's going to happen. Okay, so you make the truth consequence, the lie consequence. Now, when you don't know, that's when it's tricky. You have to, I always tell parents, a lot of what you do as a parent is a civil court. It's not a criminal court.
Meaning?
The preponderance of the evidence in a civil court.
Right, you don't need,
In a criminal court, you have beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, reasonable doubt.
Most parenting is a civil court.
Right.
You know what? Your sister's got a bruise on her arm that exactly matches your knuckles.
Right.
I didn't see it, but I'm going to make an assumption
here. There's nobody else here who could have
we did the
made
DNA.
that happen, right. Now, you also, he said, she said, mom said, children with siblings have Wolfram consciousness, know exactly what's right or wrong for their brother and sister. That's an example. Let me ask you, though, when you're doing your radio show and you're doing your practice, how similar are the concerns you hear in your radio show to your actual normal practice?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. The difference is, in the radio show, I can only offer some assumptions. I can only say, well, if this would happen. In therapy, you can start digging. You can really, well, what happens then? Okay, so how long had you been doing this? What does he react? Is there a grandmother in the scene? Well, what does she do? Oh, she comes over and visits. Does she babysit? You just start peeling back all these layers and find out the dynamics.
And what would you say is the age bracket of most of the concerns you hear these days of the children that they're talking about?
If we're talking children, because I see a lot of adults,
okay,
the age bracket is probably 8 to 12. If we're talking adults, the number one thing I see, and I think that's because of the environment we're in here, a religious environment, parents who are absolutely destroyed and distraught by the direction of their adult children.
Okay.
Away from the faith, severing connections because of politics, because of religion. They can't understand.
And
this.
how did this happen? Really?
Oh, yes, exactly. And a lot of guilt, a tremendous amount of guilt.
Yeah, what did I do wrong?
What did I do wrong?
could
And
I-
most of
could
the time
I
they
have
didn't do
done?
anything wrong.
What could I have done? Well, there is something called original sin combined with free will, right?
And I use this analogy. I carry it out. I say, could Jesus get most people to follow him? No. Well, are you better than Jesus?
Right.
You know, you sinless? Can you do miracles?
Hey, pick Judas.
He needs a better HR, you know?
So anyway, let me just ask you before we go, another book in the works?
Yes. Manuscript on anxiety, the #1 symptom that brings people to a counselor and therapist. Number one.
Is it worse today than it's ever been?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, and the next book will explain.
Why? Yeah.
Why that's the
it's
case.
a trilogy.
Okay, all right.
Thanks,
Always
Don.
great, Ray. Dr. Ray, the one and only drama-free discipline. Dr. Ray coaches you to parenting success. Proudly published, as I said, by EWTN Publishing and naturally available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. EWTNRC.com is for all things Catholic. I'm Doug Keck. This is Bookmark. We shall see you next time. Thanks for joining us.